This is the story of a teacher who has been involuntarily transferred because the scoring system says her white skin counts for less than her talent as an educator. It's good to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So tell me the story. What's going on here? We've got this lady, I believe it's a lady, and she is a good teacher by all indications. And so sorry, thanks for doing such a great job, but no, you're the wrong skin color.
Yeah, so we represent a special education teacher. She worked in the Madison School District for 14 years. She was at Thoreau Elementary School. And, just based on the changing numbers of students, sometimes they need to involuntarily transfer a teacher. So they needed to transfer a special education teacher. And so they have to decide which one to transfer. There were 5 there. And they applied this rubric that they adopted 4 years ago that we believe was applied to select her based on her race over the other options. The other sort of main option was the Black teacher who had been there only 4 years. And she was, our client, Kally, was probably one of the best special education teachers in the district. And so this rubric that they applied was a policy change that they made about 4 years ago. Previously, the policy was entirely seniority-based. So if the district needed to lay off a teacher or transfer a teacher, it was just whoever had been there the shortest amount of time, purely seniority-based. And the school board and the superintendent and high-level staff, right after George Floyd's death, proposed a change to this policy. And it was initially pitched as, we need to change this because seniority isn't always a measure of a teacher's effectiveness, and we want to keep our highest performing teachers. So, okay, that's a good reason to change it, and I probably would agree with that change. But then over the course of the year that they were working on it, they ended up eliminating any criteria based on a teacher's actual performance or effectiveness. And the scoring system that they ended up with has 4 factors, and the most important factor, 40% of the grade, is quote unquote culturally responsive practices. You can get a score from 0 to 3, and there's all these bullet points for what each of those grades means, 0 to 3. And in the original draft that they voted on, you would get a 0 if you took a colorblind approach and focused on equality. In other words, if you treat students equally, you get a 0 out of 3. The current version of the rubric is heavily race-based. To get a 3, you have to prioritize Black students of color over other students. It's laced with DEI rhetoric. It's measuring the extent to which a teacher understands their quote-unquote implicit biases. So heavily race-based criteria, very manipulable, very subjective. And so this is what they're using to decide who gets laid off and who gets transferred. And just very obvious at the time that this is adopted that the end result of this is going to be the district losing its best teachers. It's going to have the opposite result of what they initially pitched it as. And now we have a very poignant example of that happening. Kally is probably one of the best special education teachers the district has. They've now lost her at the expense of its most vulnerable students.
Yep, and that's why this is the stories we're talking about, because the kids we're talking about here are kids with problems, kids who need special ed. Special ed, to get a good special ed teacher, first off, you have to be a certain kind of person to want to do it, because it's hard. So if you're good at it and you want to stick around, she's been at it for 14 years. She's rated as one of the best special ed teachers. I mean, that's a unicorn, for crying out loud. She's a gift. And so, but yeah. She's white. Sorry. She doesn't have culturally responsive education practices, even though she's so good. She's helping kids regularly. So sorry. So again, I asked the question, how is DEI helping? How is it helping the Black kids? How is it even helping the Black teachers? How is it helping anybody? Because if you're not helping the Black kids, you're sure as hell not helping the Black teachers. How is it helping anyone to say, let's give useless attention to kids based on their skin color or cultural, history? Let's give them the attention that's not going to help them and call that culturally responsive education. Get rid of the teacher who's just going to say, hey, I'm just going to try to teach this kid to read. That just, it's demented, and it's so poisoned everything, Luke.
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, what these kids need, what all kids need, is the best possible teachers they can get. And, you know, when I met with Kally the first time, when I met her, I mean, her heart just immediately comes out for these kids. She has dedicated her life to special needs kids. Just sort of one quick story. During COVID, the Madison School District was virtual for a year, as we all remember. She immediately volunteered to continue working in person for special needs kids. And she later heard from an administrator that she was the only special education teacher on the west side of Madison to volunteer to do that. I mean, she's just, her reviews are glowing. They call her a superhero. One of the reviews says, I have no feedback. You have designed the model for dealing with autistic kids and helping them. So, I mean, she's just an incredible person. And the fact that she got selected just goes to show how crazy this is, that we're focusing on all this DEI stuff rather than retaining the best teachers we can get. I mean, that's how you help Black kids. That's how you help white kids. That's how you help all kids. And you know, after she was selected, she sort of reverse engineered it and realized she had been given a 1 out of 3 for culturally responsive practices, and went to her principal and said, what have I done that doesn't demonstrate that? Can you give me any examples? Because none of her reviews ever criticized her for that. She got no response. And one of the emails she got from her principal said, administration has told us we're not allowed to share your scores with you, which just to me says they're trying to hide something. So,
oh yes,
we're hoping this case will expose not only what happened to Kally, but just how the district is applying this rubric district-wide, and we're hoping it changes the policy ultimately.
Well, it seems like it is in violation of the Supreme Court, which said, look, you can't create these mechanisms that dodge our ruling on race. And yet this is a mechanism that dodges the ruling on race, that fundamentally does the same thing, is just basically saying, look, you're white, you're demoted, you're Black, you're promoted. That which is pretty overt, but it's not exact. I mean, this is not exactly subtle what we see going on here, but the Supreme Court said twice in 2 different cases, you can't just create different ways to do the exact same thing. And here's the Madison School District. It seems to me in violation, not just of President Trump's executive order, but a couple of Supreme Court decisions.
Yeah, yes, it definitely is, of course. And, you know, the Attorney General recently released a memo that identifies that these sort of these proxies for race discrimination, quote unquote, culturally responsive practices, are often used in practice to discriminate based on race. That looks like what's happening here. We think that's what's happening here. That's why we filed the complaint. So, you know, we're pleased that the current administration is prioritizing this, is focusing on this. So the first thing we did is file a complaint with the EEOC. What can happen is the EEOC can choose to do a thorough investigation and sort of take over the case. And so we're waiting to see what they will do. That could take a few months. But if they choose not to investigate it, then they send us a right to sue letter and we can go to court, and we will. Right. But yeah, I mean, this is, in my view, pretty clearly looks like it's being applied as a proxy for race discrimination. And that's what we're trying to expose. Luke,
tell me, you know, I've got a couple more questions here. So they have corporation counsel, right? They have representation for the school district. There are lawyers who review these rules. How do you look at this rule and say, oh, yeah, that totally comports? Or are they not doing that and they're saying, well, we're probably going to get away with it because somebody is going to have to sue us to make us stop doing it? So I think even after an EEOC complaint, if it goes in favor of Ms. Bishop, the Madison School District's not going to do squat unless you actually do go forward and try to force them, or the Trump administration finally, makes people take seriously the threat to withhold funding. But, you know, this is, I mean, they know, they're lawyers. They're not stupid, right? I mean, it's not like they're all wet behind the ears, fresh out of law school, right?
Right. I mean, look, you've been talking about this and covering this DEI stuff for a long time. I just think I think the culture in a lot of public schools, and probably Madison especially, is just they have so bought this idea, hook, line, and sinker, that equity means we actually have to discriminate on the basis of race to bring up certain races against others, that they're just not even ashamed about it anymore. They just talk about it publicly, right? In law school, when you talk about discrimination cases, sort of they teach you it's often circumstantial evidence, and haha, wouldn't that be funny if in some case they said explicitly, "Dear diary, we're discriminating against, based on race." We have that everywhere here, right? I mean, you have the school board, you have the superintendent, you have high-level staff all saying publicly in meetings. You could read our complaint if you want to see all the quotes, watch all the videos, where they say, we're making this change because we want to protect our teachers of color. We're making this change because the teachers that have been here the longest are the whitest, right? I mean, it's just like, it's pervasive, and they just say it openly and explicitly. So, yeah, I mean, I think their lawyers are going to look at this and go, we're in a tough spot here. And so I hope the EEOC sees it the same way. I hope they open an investigation. I hope we can expose how this is actually being applied to all teachers across the district, because I'm sure Kally is not the only one for whom this has happened, and
yes,
it's hurting
I'm positive.
all the kids in the district.
Positive,
right.
That's 100% true. No doubt there are also children who have been discriminated against based on their skin color because of DEI. Equity equals discrimination. Equity is racism. That is the modern definition of it. The definition that is functional right now. That's what it means. One last question. What the heck did George Floyd have to do with special education in Madison, Wisconsin? That happened in Minneapolis.
Right. Good question. Nothing. But, that's what sort of kicked off this whole focus on this. So that's why I brought it up.
Right. St. George Floyd. Also wondering, where's the Attorney General? Why is it taking Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty? Where's Jill Underly at DPI? All of these two institutions ought to be defending this teacher. But it's up to you guys, as always. Luke Berg, I appreciate the time on the program today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me on.